Now for the news in detail. Pakistan's military says 7 soldiers have embraced martyrdom in 2 separate incidents in the midwestern Balochistan province. The military's media wing said 6 were martyred in an IED blast in Mach, while 1 in cross-firing with militants in Mand area of Kach district. In a statement, the Inter-Services Public Relations said an FC vehicle was struck with an IED while returning to base camp after a routine patrol duty. The media wing said the martyred include a junior commissioned officer and a civilian driver. The ISPR said Naib Subedar Ehsanullah Khan, Naik Zubair Khan, Naik Ijaz Ahmed and Naik Mola Bakhsh are among those martyred in Mach. Meanwhile, Sepoy Imdad Ali was the name of the martyred personnel in Kach. Pakistan's army says unprovoked firing by Indian forces has seriously wounded a civilian in the Khoirata sector along the line of control. In a tweet, the military's media wing said Indian forces deliberately targeted the civilian population with automatic weapons. It said the wounded person from Jijat village has been evacuated to a nearby medical facility. Earlier, Pakistan had summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register a strong protest over ceasefire violations along the line of control. Pakistan has reported 39 more deaths from coronavirus in the past 24 hours, taking the tally to 939. The health ministry said the number of COVID-19 infections has risen to nearly 44,000 after over 1,800 more people tested positive. It said almost 12,500 coronavirus patients have recovered across the country. Officials said the province of Punjab has recorded nearly 16,000 cases, Sindh over 17,000, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa more than 6,200. There are 2,820 infections in Balochistan and 1,034 in the capital, Islamabad. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister Imran Khan says the government has to maintain a balance between protecting the economy and tackling COVID-19. He said the government has allowed industries to continue work, but they should implement preventive measures. In the U.S., the death toll from coronavirus has crossed 90,000 after 759 people died there in the past 24 hours. The global COVID-19 death count has crossed 318,000, with over 4.8 million infections. More on that now in this report.
As the number of infection cases in the U.S. crosses 1,500,000, President Donald Trump tweeted to reopen the country. White House is now blaming its own scientists for the high number of deaths, saying the Center of Disease Control and Prevention let the country down with the COVID-19 testing. Meanwhile, Brazil has recorded 674 new deaths and also became the country with the 3rd highest number of infections after the US and Russia. Mexico has decided to start easing restrictions despite surging number of deaths and infection cases.
In Mexico, 51,663 have had COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic in Mexico, and that was on February 28, 2020. That was when the first case was detected. 11,300 cases have occurred in the last 14 days, an active period for the pandemic. Please note that recent cases keep on going up.
In the meantime, France's administrative court has ruled that the government must lift a blanket ban on meetings at places of worship within 8 days. But the UK's deputy chief medical officer has warned the coronavirus spread will most likely pick up again in autumn.
Only if we get a vaccine that is really capable of suppressing disease levels will we ever be what we would call kind of out of this. And so from that perspective, we may have to live and learn to live with this virus in the long term, and certainly for many months to come, if not several years.
China has reported 6 new COVID-19 cases with no deaths. Hong Kong has extended its social distancing measures that prohibit gathering of more than 8 people.
U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad is headed for Doha and Kabul for talks with Taliban representatives and senior Afghan officials. In a statement, the State Department said Khalilzad would meet Taliban officials to discuss the implementation of the Doha Agreement. It said he would press for steps necessary to commence intra-Afghan talks, including a significant reduction of violence. The State Department said in Kabul he would meet officials to explore steps the Afghan government needs to take to initiate peace talks. The Yemeni army says it has killed 20 Houthi rebels and has seized strategic military points in Nihm district east of the capital Sana'a. Houthis have not yet commented on the development. In a statement, the government's coalition forces said many weapons and ammunition were also captured during the operation. It said the military has liberated strategic areas in the mountains of Bahrah and Manama. Yemen has been beset by violence and chaos since 2014 after Houthi rebels overran much of the country, including the capital Sana'a. A rocket attack has targeted the Iraqi capital Baghdad's heavily fortified diplomatic green zone. In a statement, the Iraqi military said the attack caused no casualties. The military said the rocket struck an empty house and was launched from an eastern district of Baghdad. However, witnesses say the rocket hit near the U.S. embassy. No one has yet claimed responsibility. A series of such raids have targeted the U.S. embassy following the assassination of Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani by the Pentagon. Libya's UN-backed Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj and Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan have discussed the current situation in the war-torn country. In a statement, al-Sarraj's office said the two leaders also spoke about the implications of the offensive being waged on the capital, Tripoli. They said a number of issues on bilateral cooperation were also discussed. The Prime Minister's office said the meeting was held under a memorandum of understanding signed between Libya and Turkey last November. Erdogan has invited al-Sarraj to visit Turkey for this bilateral meeting. In Libya, Khalifa Haftar's forces say they will perform a tactical withdrawal from some front lines in southern Tripoli. The statement came a day after rebel forces lost the strategic Al-Watia airbase to government forces. In a statement, spokesperson Ahmad al-Mismari said Haftar decided to withdraw so locals can enjoy Eid al-Fitr in peace. The government victory follows, a months-long counter-offensive which has pushed Haftar troops out of much of Libya's western coast. Haftar launched an offensive in April 2019 to seize control of Tripoli, resulting in a stalemated conflict in which over 1,000 people were killed. Israel's outgoing Defense Minister Naftali Bennett has claimed Iran has begun withdrawing its forces from Syria. The minister made that statement without offering any evidence to support his assertion. In his valedictory address, Bennett claimed Iranian forces have also started evacuating a number of bases in Syria. The outgoing minister urged his successor, Benny Gantz, to maintain pressure on Iran. The minister said the trend of Iranian forces might otherwise reverse in the war-torn country. Neither Iranian nor Syrian officials have responded to Bennett's comments as yet. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, targeting suspected arms and troop movements by Iran and Lebanese Hezbollah. The United Nations Syria mediator has urged the U.S. and Russia to push for talks aimed at bringing about peace in the war-torn country. During a UN Security Council meeting, Geir Peterson asked both countries to make the most of the relative calm prevailing in Syria. He said since the start of the war, too many fleeting opportunities to turn dynamics towards a political path were lost. Peterson said those missed moments were followed by renewed violence and hardening positions. The envoy said renewed cooperation and trust building between international stakeholders and Syrians are essential. Peterson is the fourth UN envoy to try and mediate peace in Syria. Certain Muslim countries are imposing restrictions on Eid prayer congregations to prevent a mass outbreak of the new coronavirus. Turkey has announced a new 4-day curfew during the holidays. The country has opted to impose short weekend and holiday curfews instead of full lockdowns, fearing possible negative effects on the economy. President Erdogan said mosques would reopen for 2 daytime prayers starting May 29th to be performed within social distancing rules. Earlier, Egypt also announced a partial curfew during Eid to maximize efforts to curb the COVID-19 infection rate. Saudi Arabia has also called on people to offer the Eid prayer at home instead of in mosques. Last week, Riyadh declared a 24-hour curfew across all cities and regions from May 23rd until May 27th. France's top court has ordered the government to lift its ban on gatherings at places of worship imposed to combat the COVID-19 spread. The Council of State ruled the ban was disproportionate and manifestly illegal. The administrative court has given Prime Minister Edouard Philippe 8 days to lift the blanket ban introduced on May 11th. Currently, all gatherings in places of worship are banned except for funerals, which are limited to 20 people. A February church gathering in eastern France is believed to be the spawning event of COVID-19 cases in the country. A U.S. biotechnology company, Moderna, is the first to report a vaccine that can train people's immune systems to fight coronavirus. Moderna says neutralizing antibodies were found in the first 8 people who took part in their safety trial. The company said the immune response was similar to people infected with the actual virus. It said larger trials to see whether the vaccination actually protects against infection are expected to start in July. The vaccine is a small snippet of the coronavirus genetic code, which is injected into the patient. Moderna says it is not capable of causing an infection or replicating symptoms of COVID-19, but is enough to provoke a response from the immune system. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Germany and France have proposed a €545 billion fund to support the recovery of the European Union's coronavirus-stricken economies. The plan was unveiled by German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron during a joint video news conference. They said the amount would be raised through the EU-backed bonds and used to help industries and regions hardest hit by the pandemic. During the talks, both leaders agreed the funds should be provided as grants. Merkel said the current economic challenge requires this unusual one-off effort that Germany and France are now prepared to take, while Macron said it is a major step forward and important for the Eurozone to remain united.
Pour la première fois ensemble, ce que nous proposons.
For the first time together, what we are proposing together, Germany and France together, to the 27 member states of the European Union, is partly to decide altogether to raise a common debt in the markets and to use these 500 billion euros.
Well, the fund will add to over $500 billion in emergency relief measures the bloc's 27 leaders signed last month. China says the U.S. is trying to shift the blame for Washington's own mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to permanently stop funding the WHO, accusing it of partisan behavior favoring China. Speaking to media, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said the U.S. had miscalculated by trying to smear China to avoid its own responsibility. Earlier, Trump said the UN agency has 30 days to demonstrate independence from China to effectively address the global crisis. In a letter to the WHO chief, Tedros Adhanom, Trump said the U.S. would also reconsider its membership in the body. The U.S. president's statement came a day after his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping pledged $2 billion for the organization. In India, 18 more migrant workers have died in separate road accidents in the last 24 hours. Government officials said the workers were trying to return to their homes amid a nationwide lockdown. 4 migrants died and 15 were injured in Maharashtra when their bus rammed a truck in Yavatmal city. In Bihar, 9 laborers died and several were injured when a truck and a bus collided in Bhagalpur city. 5 migrant workers, including 3 women, lost their lives in different road accidents on highways in Uttar Pradesh. Meanwhile, dozens of migrants have clashed with police in the western state of Gujarat, demanding they be sent back to their homes. State officials said police fired tear gas shells to disperse the rioters and detained nearly 100 protesters. Venezuela has released video testimonies from American citizens who were involved in the alleged military incursion into the country. In a video, U.S. citizen Luke Denman says one of their mission's objectives was to abduct Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. Denman said they were tasked with securing an airfield to put Maduro on a plane to the U.S. He said they had evaluated it to be a pretty high-risk mission as they were effectively invading Venezuela. The Venezuelan Information Minister Jorge Rodriguez said his country has infiltrated Colombia's armed forces and intelligence services for more information.
This information on alleged armed incursion is the result of the infiltration that we have within Colombian intelligence, within the intelligence of the Colombian armed forces.
In Brazil, people have found rescue in animals to deal with anxiety and emotional wreckage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Officials say an initiative, Pet Delivery, has already lured over 1,000 people interested in adopting an abandoned animal. This report has the details.
As the pandemic takes its toll on people's lives, imposing social distancing measures that keep families and friends apart, emotional distress has become a common side effect. To deal with that, in Brazil's COVID-19 hotspot Rio de Janeiro, the mayor's office has come up with a pet delivery campaign that has found homes to 53 animals since April 4. This is how Fatma adopted her dog to help her deal with the growing anxiety.
This moment we are going through is very difficult. It's difficult for everyone. I'm sure she will give me a lot of love, and I love her too because it's a pure love. It's a love that does not cost anything.
After the first contact, a questionnaire is applied to identify which animal is most suitable for each person. All adopted pets are sprayed, vaccinated, and given an identification chip before the delivery.
The animals for adoptions have all been mistreated for a long time and abandoned. When the animals are received by the shelter, they are examined. If the animal has not been castrated, then we prepare to do that. The animal is then vaccinated, dewormed, and we put a microchip for identification and to state whether the animal will be able to put up for adoption.
Rio de Janeiro's animal shelter currently has around 900 abandoned animals for adoption.
Oil prices have jumped to their highest in over 2 months on positive early results of a potential COVID-19 vaccine. They also picked up on optimism about a resumption in economic activity and signs that producers were following through on planned output reductions. Brent crude oil settled at over $35 a barrel after gaining nearly 8.5%. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude rose over 10% to about $32.5 a barrel. Those were the highest settles for Brent and WTI since March 11th, just a few days after prices began to collapse. They fell due to the failure of a production cut agreement between OPEC and Russia. Huawei says new U.S. export rules to limit its access to key technology threatens the global telecom industry. In a statement, Huawei rotating chairman Guo Ping says the U.S.'s move to curb its access to global chip supplies will inevitably hurt its business. Huawei said the new restrictions to limit its access to key technology are arbitrary and pernicious. However, Guo said Huawei was committed to complying with rules and had significantly increased R&D and inventory to meet U.S. pressure. He said the U.S. campaign against Huawei will ultimately damage the country's credibility with international companies.
Our business will inevitably be massively impacted, but this past year of practice has given us a thick skin. We are confident that we can find a solution soon.
The UK has announced a new post-Brexit tariff regime to replace the EU's external tariffs. After decades outsourcing its trade policy to the EU, Britain is seeking free trade agreements with countries around the world. Speaking to media, the UK International Trade Secretary Liz Truss said the new regime will maintain a 10% tariff on cars, but it will cut levies on tens of billions of dollars of supply chain imports. Truss said the new regime, known as UK Global Tariff, will be simpler and cheaper than the EU system. He said it will apply to countries which the UK has no agreement and removes all tariffs below 2%. 60% of trade coming into the UK will be tariff-free on WTO terms or through existing preferential access. European stock markets are trading lower, halting the positive trend set at the start of the week despite rising hopes for a COVID-19 vaccine. Investors' interest in the markets remains muted as stocks edged lower due to profit-taking. CAC 40 in Paris is trading nearly 0.5% lower. London's FTSE 100 has lost marginally. Frankfurt's DAX is trading marginally lower as well. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the gains, closing over 2% higher. Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained nearly 2%, while Japan's Nikkei 225 closed about 1.5% higher. The Shanghai Composite gained nearly 1%. Meanwhile, the international benchmark Brent crude oil price has gained over 2%. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. Well, that's all from me for the moment. For the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.news. Thanks for watching.